it's Writing Wednesday, and today you find me here in my classroom because earlier today I was here in my other role as a teacher, and I drew this on the board and was talking to my students about plot graphs and how we can look at the way a story unfolds as a graph, from the beginning, building through increased conflict, to the point of highest interest, the climax, and some kind of resolution. And it got me thinking, that's very easy to say, but for me it's often much harder to do. When I think about starting a new book, which is kind of where I'm at now, because I've done this draft of A Sudden Sun, it's with the editor, who I'm happy to say likes it a lot so far, and of course I'm starting to think about new projects. But when I start to think about what a new project, I always think of setting. I always think, where and when do I want to write about? What interests me enough that I want to spend time in that place in that era researching and writing a story? And then the next thing I think of usually is character. Who are the people I want to be writing about? Who are these characters who are going to become real people and inhabit my head for the next several months to a couple of years? I mean, the thing is, when I think about this, everything that I automatically want to do when I start a story takes place down here, where I'm creating the setting and developing the characters. It's all background, but what's difficult for me is this, plot, the whole graph. In other words, what happens in the story. I have never in my life approached a new story from the perspective of, here are the events that are going to happen and here's why they're important and how it's going to be resolved. That's always imposed upon it later. It doesn't come to me naturally at all. I'm not a plot-driven writer, and I think sometimes my work suffers from that. So I was just thinking about this the other day from the perspective of starting a new project, when two different people on the internet drew my attention to this website that's been shared a lot lately called the Periodic Table of Storytelling. And what it does is takes a bunch of familiar character types and plot devices, all as cataloged on the website TV Tropes, which is not really just about TV, but is about storytelling conventions in general, and is a website you could easily fall into and lose yourself in for hours. But it takes all of these different storytelling conventions and puts them together in a periodic table, like that boring one we all learn in chemistry, but way more fun. And so you have a column here, for example, a column of villains, and a column of plot devices, and a column of character types, and that sort of thing. And so I wonder, could it be as simple, when I'm trying to make my stories more plot-driven and more interesting, as, looking at a menu of possible plot devices and going, oh, I'll take that one. For example, maybe my main character just needs a call to adventure. And as I click on that, I discover that the call to adventure is the first step on the hero's journey, where the hero must leave the known world behind and venture to unknown regions. And of course, we think of that most often in terms of sci-fi and fantasy for a character like Luke Skywalker, for example, but of course it could happen to a character in any kind of story. Maybe my character needs to respond to a call to adventure. Or maybe if things are getting a little humdrum in my story, I need to look at the table of villains and go, I think I'll insert a magnificent bastard. A writer friend of mine the other day actually showed me another tool that was kind of similar to this periodic table of storytelling. It was a box of story cards that were almost like tarot cards, and that you could lay them out, but instead of symbols on them, they all had story elements. So I lay out a card from, a plot element and discover that a character has a deep, dark secret. And there were probably hundreds of these cards to pick from. That really intrigued me, but at the same time, I'm not sure I could ever really see myself using it. I mean, in a way, it's kind of the same thing as using just writing prompts to get you going. And I know writers who have come up with brilliant story ideas using a generic writing prompt that they got online or in a workshop or something. I've attended a workshop where I used a writing prompt to help move my story forward or get me through a difficult scene, but I have to admit there's an element to all this which feels kind of wrong to me. It feels inorganic. I feel like if I'm getting story ideas or plot ideas from anywhere else, whether it's a box of cards or a periodic table or a workshop full of writing prompts, then the plot is not growing organically out of the characters and setting. And I'm starting to think maybe this insistence that everything has to grow organically out of it is, maybe it's holding me back. Maybe I should be open to trying more tools and tricks, but I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work for me. And I don't know if the characters that I'm just starting to get to know intuitively and write a little bit about for the new book are even going to experience a call to adventure, or meet a magnificent bastard, or have a deep dark secret. Who knows? But even though I feel like plot is something I need to work on, I have to admit I love this stage. I love the beginning. I love starting to think about things and figure out which direction I'm going in. So I'm definitely going to be talking more about that in the next few weeks.